13. Order. Mr. Zink, will you please call the roll?
Weird. Mr. Argo.
Present.
Ms. Casper.
Here.
Mr. Horton. Here. Mr. Wynn.
Here.
Ms. Schaefer.
Here. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I need a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Is there a second? Oh, sorry. Second. Is there any discussion? Mr. Zink?
Mr. Wynn.
Yes.
Ms. Schaefer.
Yes.
Mr. Argo.
Yes.
Mr. Horton.
Yes.
Ms. Casper.
Yes. I need a motion to enter into executive session to prepare for conducting or reviewing negotiations or bargaining sessions with public employees concerning their compensation or other terms and conditions of their employment. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second. Second. Mr. Zink?
Mr. Argo.
Yes.
Ms. Schaefer.
Yes.
Mr. Horton.
Yes.
Mr. Wynn.
Yes.
Ms. Casper.
Yes. We shall return. Can't promise you when.
Carver.
Oh, yeah.
It doesn't, it takes me a minute to like. We had to call recess later.
Okay, I am pulling us out of executive session and we will continue on with our meeting, and we are at the point of our meeting. We're going to see the master facility presentation and discussion for my agenda. Who's up? Oh, do I need to?
We're just getting this turned on.
I have nowhere to go.
I know where to go. It's thinking.
You wanna use that?
Yeah.
Look, Lisa's here.
Hi.
Hey, Lisa.
I'm like, that's like fancy.
It's the least.
Like, that's amazing.
Wait about.
We've got everybody today. Lisa, Yvonne's. You was. It was hot in that room.
Oh, it felt glorious in that room.
It was
It
what?
was glorious in that room.
It's like a sauna.
I want you to get a cold plunge, be fine.
This is the cold one. Cold one. Good chocolate.
So conversational certainly, but we're gonna have some guests kind of come up and get kind of interject as well. So kind of presentation, discussion all at the same time. I'm gonna sit just because it feels a little awkward up here. But again, the purpose of today really is to get in a lot of weeds around master facilities, right? Couple of things from our last meeting, you know, we had not a vote, but a consensus around C1. And so we really kind of wanted to delve into various aspects of that. The plan itself, the educational benefits from that. We wanted to talk a little bit about the difference between CFAP versus ELP. We wanted to talk about visioning. We also had some conceptual drawings that I know that we had discussed about. We'll talk about those program of requirement pieces too, where you see how many classrooms that entails. And then also we want to talk about the schedule, right? Because the schedule is important because we have been talking about this for a very long time. And we want to know with our community when we'll actually see that to fruition. And the operational efficiencies that would provide. But then Yen will always also talk to us a little bit about that ballot language, right? Our next big piece. I mean, while all of that other stuff is great, the visioning, the concepts, the plan, all of that. Ultimately, our next step is what would we put on the ballot for November, right? Again, we think that is our timeline, anticipated timeline, what that would look like and make us have the greatest chance for success because we want our community to feel good about this plan and support the plan. So really, we're just going to start off with the plan, okay? And I'm going to, so this is kind of our agenda for the meeting. The plan, C1, I feel like sometimes if you're like me, we talked about so many plans that sometimes you got to see it again to believe it and like get your mind around it. So we'll talk about that. And Tom, Craig and I will kind of tag team those pieces, okay? Tom, you were on forward or you want?
No, that's fine. So, option C1 concentrates on what is the first segment. And, based on, the survey information, based on the leaning of the board, and with administration, first step, natural step is to, establish the middle school concepts, the 6 to 8 buildings, middle schools, and they would actually be the way we have them, shown as additions and renovations, as well to Plains as well as to East Freshman. And then at the 9th and 12th grade, we'll talk a little bit later why, but they're actually new independent buildings just 20 feet away from the what we assume will be is still the front door of the building. And we'll show you how those work. Those spaces, the types of spaces that could be incorporated into that program. So.
I think just kind of looking at that, just to remind us, the grays are the decommissioned buildings, right? So Adina down in the Pisgah area, Ridge Junior there, and then West Freshman Creekside. So those would be the 3 decommissioned. You also have some uniqueness right? In this particular plan, when you look at like the two Hopewells there, those are together, right? They're side by side. Those would both become K5 buildings. In fact, President's Council asked a question about that the other day. We envision one of those being the west side and one of those east side. And the same thing there with Liberty and Woodland. You're gonna have two buildings pretty close together. We could discuss those being two separate K5s. We could discuss those being joined because of their proximity. But those are just some of the pieces to continue to remind in the back of your mind. Create some different opportunities in that plan as we go to all K5s in that model outside of the 6 through 12.
Is Ridge still settled as a,
Ridge would be decommissioned in that
okay, because I know we were
Yep.
talking about trying to get a
variance. Mhm.
variance, so no variance for that, okay.
We actually did not require a variance. We worked with the state to reanalyze it. So it was actually two-thirds. It was a little easier process that way. And when Dr. Whiteley mentions decommission, the board will have down the road, you don't make a decision right away. You do incorporate the demolition dollars now, but if the township or there's another entity that you feel there could be a better use for that building, that could be entertained. It's always nice to go ahead and demo the buildings if you don't think that you're going to ever need them, because that way it just makes the sale of those properties a little easier. You won't have to, it won't be as attractive to charter schools and things like that. So
Also, we had a question about that a couple months back about like just the legalities of that. I know we had it in policy that it came up. So this is a memo from Gary about that. Again, not necessarily prevalent right here and right now, but I wanted to give this. Pass it, that it has his scope of the current law around that and what it means to have property and have buildings in the charter school pieces. So I asked him to write that up kind of in non-legalese so that we could have that. This one at time comes, like I said, I just wanted to make sure you have that in front of you. We don't have to, it's not a now decision, but I think it's also just relevant as we continue to engage our community.
so the next slide. So we wanted to kind of cover the cost, and by the way, all this will be added. I think they were the presentation was just emailed to you, so it'll be shared. You'll have access to it. So we wanted to go through the segment one, which is being co-founded because funded because of the entry into the CPAC program. What we have is the at the very top are the construction costs per the OFCC in terms of the additions and renovations to lanes and freshmen. We then also have the independent built costs shown for the east and west high schools. In addition, I already mentioned the demolition dollars, which are $2.6 million. They're incorporated into the plans. You don't have to commit to it till later, but it is funded as part of what will be $233 million co-fundable project. And then on top of that, we have always said that there's certain things about the state that you gotta love and other things that you don't always have to love, but they have a tendency to underfund or estimate project costs. So we typically incorporate a certain percentage. In the past, we've been incorporating about 14% to account for any unexpected increases in cost. The state right now, we're waiting for their new cost set. So all the numbers that they've given us over the last several weeks, they're about ready to change again. But they're only showing about a 3.8 increase, a percentage increase in their budget, which is going to be low, and they can attest to the tightness of their budget. So we highly recommend LFIs for budget adjustment as well as for additional spaces that the district might want to have that isn't per the minimum state standards. We also, based on the program and our discussions, have PI, an allowance for PI improvements for just over $15 million, which will, I think, help the district immensely. So a total package of just over 300 million. The state share is 77 million, so the local share will be just over $223 million of the whole program.
So, I think, particularly the last time around, money kind of dominated the conversation, right? And I think that is not the narrative that we want for our community, right? This should be about the opportunities and the educational enhancements that this provides our students. And so when we go back to our community survey and engagement and listening sessions, everyone supported those fewer grade bands, right? That we want 3 transition points for our students rather than the multitude that we have now. I think people understand that consistency is very important. I also think in the K-5s, you'll see class size on there. That is the number one thing that I think our families are looking for us to solve. That class size, again, we're not looking at a class size of like 18 or 17, right? We're looking at a class size of the upper threshold of 24, right around that. So in that kind of, I'm going to say there's always a threshold or range. I would say from 21 to 24 is the sweet spot that we're looking for. Again, kindergarten might be a little bit lower, 6th grade might be a little bit higher. Right now, consistently, our thresholds, again, several classrooms and opportunities with 30 plus in there, but we're consistently in that 27, 28 range in all of our K-6 buildings and on top of those 30s. Consistent year-round specials. I think special is that idea of the whole child, making sure that we have really strong enrichment, not only in STEM and those, but also the arts and the humanities, making sure that students have a 4 to 5 day experience in specials. Sometimes you take a day off and you have a 4-day plan, but really that we can make sure that our kids are dipped all throughout the years in PE, music, PE and health, music, and then art. And then also, I think there's some opportunities to look at more of like a STEM special or something that is more maybe future ready focused that we can talk about as well. And then longer stretch of time in one building, that goes back to the fewer grade band transitions. But I also think the ability that you have to build relationships with students in a longer stretch of K-5, you can't put a price on that. Your teachers know you, your counselors know you, your principals know you. When you look at relationship building and the touch points of having an adult that cares for you and is a touch point in your building, those behavioral trends, you really see a reduction in those over time. And so there should be some kind of discipline and behavior pieces that we see benefit from that longer stretch and those touch points. In the 6 through 8, again, we're looking for access to opportunities. So our 6th graders, because they're coming into the junior high or middle school model in this case, they would have opportunities to art earlier, they would have opportunities to music earlier and electives. Again, really starting that child on that career and workforce readiness path of understanding their talents, understanding their skills, and being able to really know those before they get to high school when there's a lot of credit and GPA opportunities. I also think opportunities for electives. Right now, if you look at our junior highs, they're pretty heavy kind of in the coding and STEM and things like that. And that's great. We have students that certainly benefit from that. But looking at expanding those, and again, really thinking outside of the box, world language is probably a little bit more of a traditional route, but looking at some really things that we can build those pathways. And those pathways would extend all the way from our seniors all the way down to 12 to make sure we have a comprehensive scope and sequence that those opportunities build as those electives continue throughout the secondary world. And the benefits of a middle school model. I know that one of the things that our community maybe is concerned about, or maybe an education point that we have, is a larger middle school, right? But really, if you look at research of the middle school model of a house within a house or a school within a school, very successful for that developmental age. So not only do you have houses to build those relationships and that community and that collaboration, which is so integral in that difficult developmental stage. But you also have time for heterogeneous opportunities in your electives and your cafeterias. And I said this to a group the other day, that opportunity in a bigger than our elementary world, but not quite big as our high school, that will really help that transition into our high school. To go from a 700 junior high into a 2000 high school, that's a lot, right? But if you go from 600 or 700 to 1,1500 to, that's a much easier stair step. And again, a much more, it has the model of a high school and the feel of some of those opportunities of electives, but it has the feel and the nurture and the relationship piece of a middle school. And then in our high school, comprehensive high school, instead of a standalone freshman building, we often hear from our students, not just our staff, our students, that the freshman building feels very isolating, right? I don't feel part of the main campus. I don't feel part of that community. This will help to really create that comprehensive high school feel, making them feel like one campus, but also have the supports of counselors, and structures that can really make sure that we have a 9 through 12 experience. When you talk about pathways for future readiness or college readiness or career readiness, they start as early as the middle school, so 6th and 7th grade, and you're really building on that and that capacity in a high school to find the credits and the talents and the skill sets that students are interested in and the aptitudes they have. And so a comprehensive high school will do that. We're going to talk about operational savings, so I'll save the staffing piece. But the student environment and the student benefits that we could really feel in our educational programming are really what the master facilities is all about. The facilities just really would enhance that and provide that continuity of the program that we're trying to build and exist. So I know one thing Christina's going to talk a little bit about, especially for our audience and our newer board members. We throw around acronyms in education a lot, like CFAP and ELP and OFCC and all these things, right? Really helping us. Is Christina here? Maybe she's not.
No, I think I'm gonna take that.
Sorry, Tom. Really,
Call me anything.
sorry. Just really differentiating for that, right? So that we understand what the difference is. We do have an opportunity that the state's going to allow us to be a little unique. So just reviewing that, I think would be helpful. And Tom will do a great job in Christina's stead.
The pressure is on. So there's not a whole lot of things that we can next. You're familiar with ALP, the Expedited Local Partnership Program, because you currently have a contract with the state. That is a locally administered contract, which basically gives the district a little bit more freedom. You earn state credits for dollars spent, but it doesn't put a check on the table. The nice thing about the CFAP program, which strangely enough, there's a lot of first year for the district, for the state, but one of the things that's unique is that you rarely get a district that enters into an ELP program and in such a short amount of time. The CFAP door doesn't usually open. It's usually at least a 2-year period. So the Classroom Facilities Assistance Program, it's the state is an equal partner, they contracts with you, sign everything together with you. They also have a project manager that's a little bit more active in helping manage the project, which is always a really good thing because their project managers have been extremely helpful, well-trained, and well-experienced. The only catch is that school buildings must be completed in their entirety. So if you're making an addition to a building in ELP, you could have made that addition and then come back later on and did the renovation. Now, if you're making an addition and the buildings are touching, you have to do the renovation. It doesn't really impact you a whole lot for the middle schools because the middle school renovation costs are relatively low. But at the high schools, it's a significant additional cost of about 90 million. Quite honestly, I have a hard time understanding that number because your high schools are in pretty good shape, and Craig and his team have done a fabulous job throughout the years in helping maintain those. But they they account for anything that will happen in this 10 years. So yes, some systems will need to be replaced during that time. So those are the big differences, and we'll highlight those as we look at the next section. We'll actually, one of the things that you had requested the last time is, hey, can we have an idea of how many classrooms, how many kind of spaces? So we're going to take you, and there's that large set of documents on your table. So we want to kind of just refresh your mind in terms of what we've done in the past. We've done some visioning with the staff, big picture stuff, and then the program of requirements. We've adjusted that according to the most recent enrollment numbers. So Lisa, I'm going to let you have some fun.
Thank you. So we did want to kind of recap where we've been in terms of visioning. Last spring, we did visioning sessions for the high schools and the middle schools. And this is just kind of a recap of, of those dates. And, we got some kind of priorities out of these, and it was helpful to understand what kind of organizational models that the groups were interested in seeing. And so we did a combined session for the schools, and then we did one each for the middle schools. And that really helps us as we go toward the program of requirements, understanding the types of spaces that are going to be most valuable. For example, we kind of heard for the high schools that there were a lot of kind of standard academic core spaces, and what was really a need is more of the sciences, tech, things that are more unique types of spaces. And so the example summary that you see up on the screen right now, that is for the new building. So we don't have the program for the purposes of this conversation outlined for the existing high school buildings. So this represents kind of what the new portion would be allotted. And so that's around 854 kids. And then the state attributes a square foot per child, and we get a total number. And these numbers are all generated from the OFCC's master plan. And it's based on the enrollment projections and very formula based in terms of the allotted square feet. So for the high schools, they are east and west in the master plan are just slightly different, but for the purposes of the conversation today, we've made one program that is very close. There will be some slight edits down the road, but for this draft, they're very, very similar. And so this is the kind of overview that shows you all of the different categories. So typical academic core, specialized support services, administrative spaces, media center, visual arts, music, physical ed, student dining, family and consumer sciences, tech ed, business ed, food service, custodial. And then the building services category is all of the restrooms, staircases, corridors, mechanical rooms, electrical rooms, those types of functions. In the link that we provided to Adam, there is a link that will open up each of the programs, but the packet in your hands is the full program for each school. So if you're want to dig into that in terms of exact number of classrooms and so forth, the full packet is there, as well as the visioning recap. So for East and West, we each of the high schools has about 332,000 square feet. They'll each get an addition of about AV building adjacent of about 142,000 square feet. And so the total enrollment will be around 2,700 for. And then for the middle schools, Plains enrollment of 2022, and because Plains and East freshmen are reno ad buildings. In these cases, we do have the existing POI alongside that. So for claims, we'll end up at about 241,528 square feet. And then for East freshman enrollment at 2,093, and we'll end up with 250,009 square feet. And again, in your packet, you have the expanded version of all of these, and again, these are just a draft. It's a good example that utilizes the best practices from the design manual in terms of the number of teaching stations per student. And so from the state's perspective, teaching stations are typical classrooms, special ed spaces, media, visual art, music, tech ed, business ed. So those are considered quote academic spaces. And so we want to make sure that we have enough of those so that we have a good ratio of students per classroom overall. Any questions?
I have a couple questions.
Sure.
Does the numbers in here as far as square footage reflect the LFI numbers as well, just from the?
This is purely the state co-share.
Okay,
Mhm. And you may notice there's some slight differences in the program square footages and the master plan square footages because when the state does the master plan, they look at any spaces that you have that are existing that might be considered oversized. And in particular, where you have a renovation addition, if you have a cafeteria that's 2,000 square feet bigger than it should be, and you only are allowed to have a certain number of square feet, they're not going to penalize you for already having that space in existence. So they give you back that overage so that you're not penalized for that. And so if you notice that there is a discrepancy, it's because of things like that with those square feet.
Like I noticed only 160 square feet for the cafeteria, so that must mean that we're already larger than what they say we need to accommodate that number of students. So
Yeah.
they're not giving us that much more,
Yeah.
even though it's a little more, it's just limited.
Mhm. Yeah, so if we look at the square foot, it's a calculation based on student enrollment and a certain number of square feet per student for types of spaces like that. And if we were already close for those reno ad buildings, then we're not gonna spend extra dollars to add on to or create another cafeteria when we're reasonably close based on the best practices of the design meeting.
So I'm looking at this pretty quickly, but are we assuming different enrollments for Plains and the freshmen that will be the new junior?
Yeah, they're
Is that what's, okay, that's
these
what's.
freshmen is 2093 and Plains is 2022.
Okay,
So
Okay.
it's slightly different, and those are based on some of the current enrollment, some of the projections, and then for the master plan, the state pulls kind of existing enrollments and then extrapolates and provides us that enrollment number.
Do we know if it's, sorry Doug, if it's fairly even, at like 6, 7, 8, is it a basic 700-ish? I mean, like, we're not gonna have.
Oh, is there a
8th
bubble?
grader.
No, it's about, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, West Side just currently is a little bit higher regardless, a couple hundred gets higher. But again, some of that balance can be found through like ASC, attendance zones, those kind of things as well.
And I would say this as well, the master plan in terms of the formulas and the calculations does not restrict the district in terms of who goes where. So this is the square foot we're going to be provided, and when the opening day comes, there may be different fees here and there that are building. So it is really just, they're just trying to tell us how many square feet we need to get to. It's not
when I'm looking across them, and I'm gonna say like the more of the shared spaces, so not looking at individual classrooms, but looking at things like music, art, theater, sports. generally, most of those, it looks like we're doubling. So it looks like we're getting kind of what we would need to handle the increased enrollment. The one thing I'm worried about is the gymnasiums and auxiliary gyms, and this doesn't even include the outdoor facilities, is we're not even getting quite the doubling.
Yeah,
That's just something that we're probably gonna have to look at from an LFI standpoint
yeah. And
to make up for
Mhm.
it, since we've got twice as many students going in this.
yeah, and so one of the, so since this is purely the co-funded version of the POR, one of the calculations that the state requires is a maximum square footage for phys ed and athletic spaces and a minimum square footage for academics. And so when we run the program, if we were to add additional PE spaces or athletic spaces, that would push us over on those ratios. And so, yeah, that is definitely something that we can look at in terms of LFI dollars, but it's based on, the kind of rules of engagement for.
Yeah, I understand. It's
Yeah.
one of the limitations that we've got here given, and I think one of the things I'm really concerned about is making sure that all the students still have the same amount of sports and athletic opportunities.
Mhm.
And so we still need to think through what that looks like from a model standpoint. Are we offering twice as many basketball teams, or are we offering other sports in addition?
Mhm.
So that could dictate the need for gymnasiums and other terms versus outdoor facilities, but
Yeah.
outdoor facilities aren't covered by any of this as well.
Correct.
So that's gonna be LFI. So there's just gonna be a big burden on LFIs for our athletic facilities.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up.
Do you want to keep going for the? So what we wanted to do is kind of give you, hey, what if, some conceptual ideas, in this case, both high schools are very similar. So what we're showing is where new building could be located, so close, but not yet connected, but in the future, easily connected, and I think you could see the central spine of the existing building extending and connecting the future. So and then that can occur after we're completed with the project. It could also occur during, potentially the next segment, depending on what the enrollment does, whether it stays where pretty steady or whether it continues to increase, as a lot of us think it will. So, but again, just to give you a placement, and you can see where some vehicles parking have to be relocated, expanded further back onto the site. Lisa, do you want to? And then, kind of just starting to give you some visuals. The idea would be that the new building would be a 3-story structure. Again, to help facilitate movement, speed of movement between one end of the campus and the other. It also reduces the amount of the footprint that we're having to occupy.
So will you go back, Tom, a second? So this is the current front door and this is how you would get into the,
Yes,
So there's no connection between the buildings.
unfortunately, no.
okay.
And we'll
When-
design where there's actually a back connection as well in the future
Okay.
for athletics. So,
Because this includes another auxiliary gym,
yes, it
right?
is.
So would that be in this new building, or would it
Yes.
be connected to the existing facility?
It will be in the new building, yes.
So would we do the programming so that, like, this kids in and out of here all day makes me nervous, like that door's gotta be left open all day, that front door. Like, would we try to keep,
You could schedule certain things in a building and certain things in another building, but the travel will be inevitable.
But I think what we're saying is that this is how it's built because it has to be right out and
But eventually
renovate the
it'll be-
whole high school. But
Eventually.
once we've built it, then we can build connectors that do not require us to go outside ultimately in the
Upon
future.
completion.
upon, so ultimately we will have indoor connectors and you won't have to go in and out the front door.
But not before kids will be in it, correct?
Correct.
Correct.
Kids will be in it before that happens.
How long?
Wouldn't it have to be completed before kids
That's
could
what I
enter,
heard.
Tom?
He's saying that
Yes. But you're not gonna leave it empty. The building would actually be completed, turnover, and then so. Yeah, it'd be at least a year or two in operation before you could.
before you can connect it, yeah, that's what I thought he said.
I'm thinking if I was in June, you could have it by August.
And I think Tom, in some of his designs, he would maybe create some of our safe and secure entrance, a vestibule. You would have a student coming from the high school to the new campus, but it would be more of a secure entrance with someone being.
And you can do that with
Static.
student badges and Raptor. I mean, that would have to be a little bit of a change for our students where they
Yeah.
badge in. You know, like staff do, you can do that with students. That's not uncommon, particularly in a high school our size.
So let me give you an example. Right now, Finneytown, we are doing a new building for them. They have the 3 other campus buildings that are completely separate. What we've done with it is that the kids will be able to move back and forth between buildings. It could, that movement will be behind gates. So the movement isn't necessarily at that point at the front doors. It could be, there could be a fence between the 2 buildings and then that corridor or that circulation can happen behind that so that it will be secure.
That makes me feel,
Yes, and we would encourage that, definitely.
yeah, I would think
encourage
that
it.
would be like, so it's really behind a gated.
Yes,
It's not just open space.
and you are allowed to do that, and the gate could touch both buildings and not be a problem.
You
So
can
the,
connect with the fence, just not with the wall.
Yes,
so the premise we're working under is we're not doing anything to the main building. Because as soon as we do, it taps into that full 90 million that we'd have to spend to remove.
yes.
It's great, though.
But that's not true for the junior highs. It's just
That is,
Correct.
that's correct.
At their renovation.
Yeah.
They're left there.
They will, and the middle schools will be one big building.
You said those fake students.
almost fake.
I love that.
So this, this is an example of, a project lab type of space, that can be used for, STEM or those types of activities.
What we heard from the staff as we went through the vision piece is we have enough standard classrooms. Lisa mentioned that. What we need is these specialty rooms, larger spaces, that students could work on projects, larger spaces for, music and art. So Lisa, we could just kind of go through a few of these kinds of types of spaces. And again, these are just early thoughts on what those could look like, but they're all for collaborative type of environments, larger spaces. So the one thing we heard from the staff is, no, we don't want the 9th graders in this new building. We want truly an integrated structure. And this new building then could be looked at as more that, hey, this is a specialty type of spaces, those kinds of spaces you don't currently have that other schools are really leaning towards. So whether there be specialized business classrooms or music or those things could easily be accommodated here versus going in and later on and renovating. The other thing too is spaces for the community, community functions, cultural opportunities for student artwork, other activities in the building to be happening. So.
Science type classrooms, so this could be physics, size, classroom.
And, bringing back to these schools, I think what we're seeing right now is a tendency to try to offer programs that have historically gone to like Butler Tech, but at least having core activities here that you can still build things, you can still learn, get a good introduction to some of the trades and just how everything's integrated.
And this would be a more traditional science classroom.
Yeah.
But in terms of scale and square footage, it gives you a good idea of what's best practices.
The steps.
I just love that we're blending Lakota East and West students together. Here's one high school again, which is.
Take the red off the Lakota East shirts.
Yeah.
We're one district.
I like the steps. We should,
That's-
every building built this has the cool steps. Love the steps.
So. I know we're navigating a lot of complexity here, right? But. From a athletic facility, I definitely understand, like, those are dedicated spaces, right? But from a music standpoint, is this envisioning where there'd be music in this and then music in the existing? Or would we be able to, with LFIs, do some musical chairs to bring all of the like places into one space?
I don't have the answer, and I'm not sure anyone can say this because you're gonna determine that after engaging your school community, your parents, some of the community members, the board, through several months of design charrettes. My gut feeling is that you're gonna wanna take the art functions, some of the music functions, not the auditorium, but some of those music functions, and move them to the new part of the building.
And so with those old spaces, we could use LFIs to convert them to classrooms or something, another use.
Yes,
Without kicking in the 90 million requirement to renovate everything.
right,
Okay, it would just have to be LFI, not part of the station.
yes.
Okay, thank you.
And we have a decent amount put aside for that, right?
Yes, we do.
We got like the 50.
51.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, that accounts for a couple of things. The fact that state doesn't always budget the increases what really would like to see in the marketplace, but also again for the types of specialty needs. Some of it could be, hey, we want bigger windows than normally on the board and things like that. So it is we believe it's a good number. Worked with Nate to come up with that number and then even increase it a little bit more just to incorporate those renovation dollars there. But again, at the high schools, we're gonna need in terms of like cafeteria space. We might look at looking how we can improve that. Right now it's very segmented, but it perhaps expands the cafeteria functions to some of those art spaces currently. So we're better off not trying to put additions on multiple parts of the building, but renovating. We can handle a lot of that renovation work during the summer.
So does the new building have a cafeteria?
No,
So
it will not.
how do you add that many more kids? I mean, they're gonna eat lunch at like 9:15.
You would, so both high schools, actually last year it was West, now it's East and West, would like to see 4 lunches. And so that would make that more feasible. Not uncommon for lunches, I mean.
Timing though, like seriously gonna eat like at
Well,
5:30?
again, I think that's when you look at start time, look at your end time, look at your time between bells, like you can
Pick up some of that.
correct.
So when we go back to after 2 years, we could potentially, extend the main streets out or something like that to fully connect these buildings. Like how much of a like ballpark cost would a project like that be?
I have not looked at that,
Yeah, okay.
but can take them.
Is it like a huge chunk of, like very high level
Are
ballpark
you
here?
talking about connecting it in more than one place? Or just connecting the 2 buildings in one place, like a hallway or a?
Well, the vision that Tom painted in my mind was that you just extend Main Street out and then it connects somehow. So maybe that's my fault for reading into that vision, but
Yeah, no, and I don't think it has to extend
all the way out, yeah.
all the way out.
Yeah,
It does.
You just need to organize it so that it connects. So essentially Main Street in the future will take a turn. So, we come up with another Main Street, Vine Street.
Roundabout.
Yeah.
yeah.
That's what it's
There you go.
about to us.
Figured it out.
We love those.
But, you know, ballpark, we would need to ballpark a square footage for that, just, you know, taking it
Yeah.
out to the kind of junction where it could turn. But again, you know, also we would escalate it out several years to get an idea of what construction costs are looking like.
But that, could be part of your next segment, as well, so.
Good stuff. I just hadn't had a chance.
So, we took a very quick look. It's a little easier, when making an addition because you don't have this connection and the dynamics of the campus. But we wanted to just kind of give you a quick look, not nearly as developed, but you know, how does the footprint expand for the middle schools? So, and these were just created fairly recent, so had a number of different options in the past, but you're at Plains with kind of, you know, an extension towards the back of the building. We've talked about it, does it want to be the additions, want to be in the back or the front? I think the back makes more sense because you already have the established front door and circulation, so there's pluses and minuses to each, but again, wanting to concentrate the additions all in one location. So
That's Plains.
it's kind of turned 90 degrees, but you might, but yeah, we're further, if the page was further east, we right off, so right off.
Princeton Road's on the far right side.
Yes, thank you. I think these are just give you an idea of the kinds of spaces, put a little bit of life to the door, which is very exciting for us, but appreciate where it might not be as exciting for a lot of others. Nate, whatever.
Sure, I'd love to. So schedule, this is very high level. Just talking through really two, this is methods, but really two scenarios we've mentioned previously in terms of the overall delivery. Ultimately, we know we finish in 2029. That scenario factors being able to hit the ground running with starting design. That we don't know that yet, whether that's possible. That requires an approval and some feedback from the state to allow that to happen. And that's really what we believe would be the best scenario in order to get to the 2029 finish. The alternative method below that is a 2030 finish. Ultimately, the driver is really when design can start. So when the state allows you to start moving forward. And so why is it a year, right? When the shift is really probably around 6 months, 4 to 6 months, in all likelihood 6 months, depending upon the design and construction team that comes on. There's certainly some value in the team that you have that has the history, that has done all the work that they presented on earlier. That helps to shorten that design timeframe. So that's why it's a little bit more compact and why the first scenario gives you that 2029 finish. Whereas the 30, ultimately you're looking at, for both scenarios, around 2 years of construction overall. Somewhat of a stagger is what we would have between the high school and the middle school, just to make sure that we're planning for that, for what the market can support. We'll evaluate that as design goes on to see if we could, have some opportunities. But ultimately, that's what you're seeing here. A couple of other items just to point out: early work. What does that mean? So what that means to us currently is switchgear, generators take over a year to acquire. And so we plan accordingly with the design team to accelerate that design to be able to do those elements early. This also means here is we're close, we're on existing campuses. So we're going to implement some things at strategic times, whether that's spring break or over the summer, to make sure that the site is safe and ready for construction to start, right? So that's what those early packages are. And then the demolition, you can see that just finishes out at the tail end after we turn over the buildings and occupy those beautiful renderings that Tom and Lisa showed you in the summer, whether it's 29 or 30, rounding out the demolition, or not abate, the demolition thereafter. Does that make sense? Any questions?
A lot of the locations we're looking at, we're eating up existing parking and adding additional parking. How should we think about that on the timeline? Would we put in that new parking ahead of time, or would we have a couple of years really dramatically reduce parking?
Potentially, it's a very, very good question. So we would work with the team overall to plan. We want to first off decide on where everything's going. We will update a logistics plan because you'll also need room for construction to happen. There's going to be a lot of things that have to happen there. So we'll put together a logistics plan that says this is where construction is going to live and how it's going to work. And we're going to hopefully minimize whatever additional monies are put in to facilitate student parking and everything else. Or we'll make the decision, you know what, we're going to have to reduce the amount of student parking. So we'll go through that all through design to make sure that as a team, we come up with what works best for everybody. Okay.
Doug, another big piece is gonna be the storm water management.
West.
It's gonna be big, so I'm trying to work more globally and say, hey, is this a regional issue, neighborhood issue? It's gonna be an important aspect.
The water at West will have to go underground, as the drainage. And the Westchester is aware of that. We kind of talked about that when we were talking about like student safety and things like that with crosswalks and things. And actually they said, you know, as soon as an issue passes, they are ready to sit down at the table and talk about water and the parking and things like that, because they want to help us make sure that it has the most efficient flow. Because there are some things that if we decide that then they want to predicate, you know, lighting, roundabouts, things of that nature that could change for them, and they want to get that on their schedule.
I do want to offer just Middletown schools. I did a number of years ago, had a similar situation between their middle school and their high school. They wanted to connect those buildings. The state made a stand, said you wait till we're done to connect those buildings for the same reasons that they're taking the position now. So we were able to create a corridor. We over constructed some of the foundations to make sure that it was more supportive of that work later. And the walkway that was there. So there are certainly some things we can do to make sure that that's easier for the district in the future whenever that decision is made to make that go into place. And it's also something that's easy. You can head north and take a look at what we did there.
We talked about it last time, Tom, about begging the FCC. Have they absolutely said no to connecting it?
They've said
Yes,
They've said no.
They have said no, and I think towards the end, we're gonna talk about things that maybe the board might wanna take on or challenges, because we don't like so
You know,
there are some things that you might.
go pick the FCC.
As far as operational efficiencies, I mean, there are several opportunities in here. One, I think, is the building themselves, right? You're taking 3 buildings offline. Now, that is certainly not probably the operational efficiency that we proposed last November, but there are operational efficiencies in that because you're reducing the footprint. Also, 2 of the ones that you were taking offline are ones that need the most love, right? I mean, West Freshman and Adina, to kind of keep those going in their daily existence, but even to try to make them usable long-term, would be pretty cost inhibitive. So prohibitive. Staffing, there are opportunities for sure to have a more efficient staffing model. One is, particularly in the middle school, even in the freshman building, specials, when you bring back a specials rotation, you reduce traveling teachers. Every time you have a traveling teacher, you lose a bell. I mean, that's just it. So instead of getting somebody who can teach 6 sections, they're teaching 5 sections because one of those sections is predicated toward their travel. Every specials teacher, because of how we have a rotation of specials right now, travels at some point in the year, right? Either quarterly or semester. So when you start reducing that alone, that is some big operational savings. The other piece is just the comprehensive grade bands. As a parent, next year I have a freshman. Looking at her schedule and just seeing, as a parent, I'm looking at a course catalog of a main campus and a freshman campus going, my superintendent hat was on of like, oh my gosh, we could so much better utilize staff and course offerings because we can't offer Spanish 1 over here because we don't have the staff, or like that operational efficiency, not only programming, but cost wise of how we can effectively use people would be certainly an important gain from this plan. The other piece that we were talking about earlier today and we've talked about is when you get a more efficient blueprint and you get consolidated grade bands, you have the opportunity for operational efficiencies in transportation. And so I think continuing to look at that and evaluate those routes and evaluate how we can also keep children on a reasonable time on the bus, and we would discuss what that is. I do think there is a chance for operational efficiency that could lend itself to a more K-12 model than a K-9 model. So Jens is going to talk about our greatest chance of success. I like that, keep it simple. But I think he's just going to talk through some of that data that we looked at a little bit about bonds and property tax and traditional versus earned. Because ultimately, like I said, we've talked about this. You can have the best laid plan, but if the community doesn't support it, then it's not the best laid plan, right? So Jens is going to kind of talk us through that.
Yeah. So the citizen-led committee did a survey that you may or may not have heard of. It's a text survey conducted by Fallon Research, who's done work for the district in the past. It was pretty revealing data. I think that the core message of not raising property tax rates would be the most successful appeal to the voters for the November election. So it was kind of a runaway when we asked the difference between the bond issue paid for with property taxes, the ability to construct with an earned income tax. Both were relatively not favorable, but it shot up when we messaged around the fact that the property tax with the bond millage retiring in 2028, that would not be property tax rate increase. That's where the success lies with the voters. That's, I think, to this keep it simple message. Voters, as we saw last November, were especially tax sensitive. But we are continuing to see the data from the survey results are that the community believes in the product, they believe in the district. They just are not willing to pay the property tax increase. So the neutralization of message of no property tax rate increase has a strong appeal, and there's a pathway to victory with that type of message. And it allows you to do, I think, very unique community responsive buildings for the students in the community. But the message there, I think, was pretty clear in what we saw from those results. I would also add the timeliness of these results. That was only 3 weeks ago that we did the survey. So it's very timely. And I think, we try to make sure that these results are usable for you all as you're making your decision. And so if there's any questions, we'll answer regarding the survey results.
So it's not a question, but if I were taking a survey and somebody said to me, do you want Texas, yes or no? Of course, I'm going to say no, but the no comes with no new property taxes. But does that mean in a year I need an operating levy? Is it enough do we have enough with not raising to do what we have to do, to maintain the buildings, to do the additional programming? I don't want, because not that the question isn't valid, because I totally believe it is and understand that, but is it, again, if you presented that to anybody, no one's gonna say, oh, yes, please charge me more. The no new property taxes, yes, that's what I want, but does that mean in the next year or two, I need an operating levy or a PI, or I don't want to be disingenuous for the people that take over after we're gone.
You're never leaving.
I am maybe. Maybe tomorrow, no, but I did, and so I, does
Yeah,
that
I
make
mean,
sense?
so, yeah, I mean, when we looked at the results, even with the no bond, it didn't get us to 50%. It got us to 48.7%, which is in the ballpark. I'll give you that, right? And then when we looked at the
A
earnings,
lot of.
A lot of
a
undecided.
lot of them, sure, absolutely. But what's interesting is when you look at the earned income tax credit, right? 33.5% was yes, 50.9% was no. Which, or the bond issue, which was half as big as what we did in November, was 33 and 51%. But that's not the results we saw in November. So I want to take that into account, is that, yes, when you ask the question about, yes, do I not want bond? Yeah, it's going to be more popular. I think this is also not necessarily a discussion just about buildings. It's about, like you said, how are we being financially solvent going forward? And what else, we're talking about from an addition there. So yes, it's easy to say, hey, we'll just keep your taxes the same and we'll get by. But if it doesn't deliver the solutions that our community asks for, I want to challenge us to do the harder job, which is to do some heavy lifting and actually convince help the community understand everything that we need to solve for here.
I think I do think that when we look at the undecided category, you see how that cuts for each of those, and you can see with the property tax, if the 32-33%, and you look at the undecideds and how that cuts, that gets to about 39%, which is the result that we saw in this. So starting at 47% with the undecideds capturing a whole different, you only need to convert a third of the undecideds to be successful with the no property tax increase request.
What does it?
You have to do a lot more legwork with the other request to get to a success.
What do you usually get with an undecided or the unsure? Like, do you get half in a successful campaign?
It usually cuts along the same percentage that you're going to see in the for against category. So you're still like, if you're getting to 50% or close to that among in the actual vote, you're going to get that. You're likely to get that in amongst the undecideds.
So if I was getting to half and the undecided was 30, I'd get to 15. Is that what you're saying?
Correct. So I mean, what it really tells you is that the earned income tax or the property tax, even though it's a reduced request, without being, so say it was, and I know it's $223 million was the one put in the survey language, but say, for instance, we're just asking for a property tax increase. It's a reduced amount we asked for last time, but we can't go out and talk about no new property tax rates, right? That still isn't successful at the ballot. And those three words up there are very important. Keep it simple. The request, the ballot language, the thing you want to look at is shorter ballot language is more successful than longer ballot. So as we think about what that looks like, if we start adding in additional requests like PIs, operational dollars, it becomes a lot more complicated to the voters. And when they see complication on their ballots, we know.
We're not allowed to pick a ballot, correct? The auditor.
Well, in the sense that
We choose what goes on the ballot,
Right.
which
Goes on the
determines what the ballot
ballot.
language
The
will.
legalese is the legalese.
Yeah.
We don't have the ability to say this is exactly how we want it worded.
We would have done.
It has to go within that, template, but
I mean, I don't dispute that, saying, hey, you can say you support schools and pay the exact same money that you pay today is gonna be more popular than saying, wait, we need more money from you.
Yeah.
But the reality is outside of this plan, we are looking at a budget shortfall starting in 2028. So even if this passes in 2028, we'd have these really nice new buildings. And unless we go back with another ballot measure, which we could choose to do, we would be looking at potentially laying off staff or closing some of these new buildings.
And then
So-
that would pull it 10% to do that again, you know? like-
So I understand, yes, what's the easy lift, but I think what we need to figure out is it a one ask to keep us solvent? Or is it a two ask and we're transparent about it in the process? I get a little concerned about saying, oh, we're gonna take the easy win on the buildings and then wind up being in really, really dire shape 2 years from now. And when I came into the district in 2011, I was inheriting that crisis. Not me, I was a parent. My kids were inheriting that crisis of cut services, reduce everything. So I'm very worried about putting us on a path fall. And I don't know how we keep it simple when we say, hey, we're not going to raise your taxes, support us. And then in 2 years say, hey, we got to start laying off teachers.
So if we do the 1 year ask that gets us, there's not a 1 year ask that we can do that's gonna pass, that's gonna keep us solvent for the indefinite future. Like how many more years would it potentially get us is the question to me. Like what's the,
Well, in 2032, we have our TIF funds coming back from the local
Yeah, that's
government,
right.
right? So that's what we're solving for, is to get to 2032.
But we also have to remember that what we asked for in November was too much, and we heard that
Loud and clear.
loud and clear, so
Packets.
other than the 223, if we ask for more, I think we have to be very cognizant of how much. Because we're not gonna
Pick the whole one.
get it all.
Yeah, I got my packet, 3 pages per packet.
Sorry. Like, all the numbers.
3 pages per, are the packets all together?
Yeah.
Yes, that's what it took me a minute, but I was like, wait.
Supposed to be.
Oh, Adam.
The very first page is the forecast says we approved it in February, so that included a 3.6 mil operating levy that you will see in the down the low part of the page. It's where the first numbers kick in the far two columns. That's where we have the new property tax on there. That was what we had in November. The result of that being the 3.6 mils. If you go to the next page is going to show you 0.75% earned income tax, no property tax levy at all. And that's, I did put the watermarks. So Julie, if you'll have I did put a date reference on there. It's just very light. Yeah, I did that. It's very light. The impact of this. So we had a few variables change. Everybody keep this one in mind, that what we had going into November changed when the December property tax reform happened. This is the first time since I believe it's 78 that we've had meaningful property tax change. So in almost 50 years, this is the first time we had meaningful change, because what we were talking about with the original forecast, it was how how a building plan could produce operational savings to avoid additional dollars. Once the property tax reform came into play, it's now put caps on our inside millage growth, which we were depending on. Part of the roadmap to get there, part of that where I kept saying it's like landing a helicopter. Part of that was going to require us to see an increase in this reappraisal that would then put us to the floor. Then in 29, taking a ride off of the floor to help us bridge the gap all the way out to 32. Now that has been capped at consumer price index. 3 years combined, that's the deflator now. So because of that, the odds of that being a successful path would require significant increases in new construction outside of what we're already seeing that one would view as significant. We would have to go from 50 million per year new construction increases to probably 5 times that, because new construction is going to increase our base. So let's not realistically assume that that might be the case. One of the things, so that's some assumptions that just had to change because of property tax reform in December after that ballot. When you look at the 0.75% earned income tax, something that you're going to want to, this is general funded debt now. Earned income tax would also be general funded revenue. So as you can see down there at the bottom, line 13.01, now I've removed the property tax because in this simulation, the property tax is not there. You then have This is assuming as if it was on November of this year. This is what this would look like in November of this year. It would begin the collection in January, but then the first drop of the collection wouldn't happen until the second half. Then you get into the following fiscal year as soon as we hit July. So that's where the timing on those will look a little bit goofy until they get moving right. So with all that being said, because this is general funded debt, part of the way that I would recommend that you would get to there is now, if you get to the 32 roll off, is now if you look at line 4.060, interest and fiscal charges, you will see in the far column $12 million coming on. That is estimated around a COPS deal you can only finance for 27 years. So it's a shorter term than the 37 year that we talked about on a bond. That changes that price point a little bit to begin with. And then it's going to have a little bit higher rate. At this point, we're assuming a 5%. So a little bit higher than what you would see on a bond. Viewed as a little bit less secure. That's why that would be the case. So you see that coming on. The first interest payment would be in 2030. That's a May, June payment. That's when interest pays. And then the principal always pays in December. That is all very common within the debt payments that we have. So the first payment would come in 30 of an interest payment. Then you would see your first principal payment come in 31, as well as interest every year there. It's just a timing because of how our fiscal years drop. But because of that, you would be able to hold on to some of the collections to help you bridge the gap over to 32. That example.
And also in that example, it's not noted, but we would also have a decrease of bond of.
I have put that over here. I didn't have it there. The bond decrease for a taxpayer is just a little bit hard to see because we're working within tools that hit different funds.
Right.
So the bond collection we have today is not going to be reflected in the forecast to show any type of a drop, but that would be a decrease. So I've made a few estimates as well. Going to assume that to be the 2.23 mil drop. Based around median. So this was let's go to AI because everybody's going to look there. A median low or a median high for our area. It seems like it's a little bit hard to catch. The internet is claiming that you could be at 88,000 for a median income up to 147. So because of that, you're looking at a 0.75 would be anywhere between $660 per year for that $80,000 earned income, all the way up to $1,102 per year for that 147. They still have the property tax drop in 29. It comes off of the bill. That then, this is where it's interesting. This is where it's hard to explain. If then you have, well, you have to make some assumptions here to get these numbers to come together. 2.23 times 35, that's how much per 1,000, $70 some, right? But if you look at our median households value, they're claiming, same AI is claiming that our median home value is somewhere between 395 and 439.5, which is going to bring that savings around 308 to 343, somewhere in there. So that's where you have a little bit of disproportionate cost because you have shorter term. You also have a smaller base of people paying.
So
But
if you did those, what you're talking about, the earned income tax would cost someone $600 based on all that medium, and the property tax would cost them $300. Is that what I'm hearing?
well, you're going to see the property tax drop either way. Either way, that's going to be the case. If somebody was at the 88,000, that's $660 a year on a 0.75. If that same 88,000 was living in a 395 valued home at this moment, that would be a 308 drop. So you're looking at somewhere in the net change for the property tax side, 346 per year. Because the drop will happen.
Right,
But
but not right away. So they'll be potentially paying both? Will that roll off?
You would until the roll off, that's correct. Now, if you go to the third page, you want to make it even more complicated.
Got too much
Because-
red writing on it.
Well, because now, exactly what Jens was saying, now we have 3 different issues to get us to a destination. And if you look at that very bottom line, it's really pretty sort of similar to where we were in the forecasted, about 20 million at the very last year, over there at the end. What this one's saying is a bond of about 2.23, because now what changed in December from what we were talking about up to the election in November was this, this has been pared back a bit as well, but this was supposed to be a way that we could get there without additional dollars. However, now operating, I've reduced that down to about a 1.5, and then that includes a 1 mil increase. So that's about 2.5 mils more. But it is much more complicated because now you're talking bond, operating, and PI.
On one ballot issue?
You can take your pick, but
That's
yeah,
not simple.
none of it's going to be.
That's-
Even if you said, let's do all at one, and then explain that we're going to be coming back. None of these are going to get some, you could pare down combining your operating and your PI, you could do that. You could pare down the types, but the ability to use this to avoid that,
Not
all
going
but
to work now.
within reasonable assumptions, that's just not going to be an achievable path.
Yeah.
I mean, we talked about some ways that you could figure out how to bridge that gap, but none of them is going to be pleasant.
And so what I'm hearing you say is that with this middle option, that would eliminate for the foreseeable future, the need for an operating levy, allow us to achieve what we want to do from an operating standpoint and provide both the facilities funds and the operating funds, given the change in legislation that's recently happened. And it's going to, when we heard a lot of the objections that the state keeps shifting all of the tax burden from income tax to local property taxes, this would decrease the burden on property taxes and shift some of it to the people who are actually earning the money and not the people who were worried about foreclosing on their house.
That's correct. It would not. I was asked a really interesting question by somebody in local government in this county that's not a school, different. Of how do you look at certain things and what would you think? Well, it depends on how you look at it. If your goal is like we heard a lot about back with the lead up to property tax reform, if the goal is to protect people on fixed incomes, this accomplishes that. They wouldn't pay it. They wouldn't have anything to pay with that. For some of the people, depending on incomes, it might be a little bit higher. But typically, it's not going to be an impact on the people that are on pensions or social securities or interest incomes.
But basically, we've shifted the burden from one group of people to another.
Absolutely. As with everything
Which the
we do.
state has done over the past 15 to 20 years, just
So-
the other way.
People, if this would pass, if we did this 75.75 and it passed, people would be paying this and property taxes until the roll off in whenever the roll off is, correct?
29. Well, but for your people on fixed incomes, they wouldn't see an increase.
I'm talking about people that aren't on fixed incomes, right?
Yeah,
You would see an increase
it would start in January of 27.
January
If you put it on
24, so
November.
you're paying property taxes and you're paying income tax.
Whatever,
29 for 2 years.
whatever calendar year you would put it in the ballot, that's when it
But
would
the
start
other-
paying the following
We're
January.
paying too. Unless we don't put anything on the ballot, people are gonna be paying more property tax. They're currently paying property.
But
The nothing passes is I feel like the worst case scenario that we want to avoid, because then we have solved none of our problems.
correct.
So there's one other, there's one big 837-year gorilla in the room, though, which is you'll get an opportunity once every 37 years to say no new millage increase, and it continues to raise additional revenue for if you do the bond on the property tax.
But we just heard we can't do that. Will not solve our problems.
I'm not speaking to the operational, I'm speaking to the opportunity of going to the voters and saying no new tax rate increase. And that's obviously an appealing message to the voters when they've heard it. I think the question is, how do you work within those parameters to go to them and say, we can solve this problem within that boundary.
Right.
No new
And then
problem.
come back to them
Can't.
2 years later and say,
But
remember
we
all the
can't.
buildings you bought? Well, we don't have anyone to staff. And then hold them hostage 3.6 mils or whatever the, projection is. I mean, they've already said it's disingenuous. I would agree with that.
How do we,
Or you operate within that.
But even if we didn't do the construction, the 2.66 replacement levy, if we, instead of bonds, we said we were gonna do an operating levy, that still would not get us solvent until 2032. So I hear you, it's easy, but it doesn't solve the problem. So I'm gonna ask us to dig in and work harder and come up with a solution that actually keeps this district on a financially solvent basis instead of taking an easy win.
Without material changes to this programming today. 3.6 mils is what we're looking at in 28,
Exactly.
without shift,
When you said,
because that was still in there with February, with the change in property tax based on. We had to assume it without the information delivered from the state at that moment.
And that's assuming the state doesn't do more property tax reform. Or the voters don't put it in people's choices, into the people's hands to do that this August or this as well.
How do any of these options affect how the state views us as far as our formula? Would either of them have us be reflected any differently? Like if we did earned income tax versus property tax? Will that push a lever one way that means we get less money from the state?
None of those are going to have a shift with us because of the way that the formula is built based around median incomes that we have for here. That's still going to stay the same. It's just now we've tapped into what the state says we can afford to. That's essentially what drives down our state funding is the state saying, based on how we're calculating, it looks like locally you can afford to pay more.
Okay, but
Whether we choose to do that or not, not nearly, that's not going to play into this. It's just a matter of that's how they view it and that's how next year we're assumed to hit that 10% minimum state share.
yeah, have you heard any more in the arenas about the property tax reform, the signatures? Do they have them? Is it going to be on the ballot? Have you heard any more
I haven't heard anything actual.
information? There's all kinds of speculation.
Just a lot.
Well, yes, they've got enough. No, they don't. Yes, it's gonna pass. No, it's not. Never been sure.
Yeah, there's only one path that would equal one issue. And that's either traditional earned income, because the other things programming as we've modeled, it would require at least two different things in order to accomplish that.
Two different things to accomplish the solvent by.
Yeah, one being, let's say, a bond and the other being PI and or operating,
But not
less than two.
and not all at the same time.
That would be,
I think we know, I don't think we can get it all at the same time. If what we had in November was too expensive, that would also.
well, and that's what I said earlier. If even when you go with one, you say, and then the intent's to go again with another one, that would probably be easier just because of the service.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's going to be easier from the campaign side.
I think to do more than one, we know is gonna be too high of a price tag. We know that, because it would be close to what we put on the ballot in November, and it was a huge failure.
I disagree.
I know you do, but
Well, no, I mean, I think last year we went with buildings at a very high price tag. This is not as much of an overall investment. And we'd be going with additional programming. We'd also be going with financial solvency. We'd be delaying any sort of ripping of teachers in 2 years. That changes the discussion tremendously, and I think people would engage with those points more than the funding mechanism, which is what they're engaged with.
I don't think at 500 and whatever it was, 43, and I don't know how far all of those things would get us back up. There was never any discussion of, well, if I was gonna get all this, I would be interested in 543. I think the price tag is just really high. I think it doesn't, the capacity for people to pay what they can pay doesn't matter if, I mean, we'd all love all of the things. We've all said that. We'd love all of the things. Everybody would love all of the things until you have to pay for it.
But I mean, I've had conversations with people in the. Like I sat next to somebody at a basketball game once and said, we need bigger arenas. Our basketball arenas aren't big enough. And I said, would you be willing to put a operating levy and they're, oh, well, no, I don't want to pay for it. I just want you to figure out how to do it. I'm thinking, okay, get out my magic wand, my genie land. So where are we? We have to make some decisions on next Monday, two Mondays from now, about what we send.
So the necessity to vote is what you would send to the auditor for them to preview over the 10 days to get you language and all of that, to look at. So we would have to, like I said, it could be multiple options like we did back in January.
In January.
I do think. This one, that's not simple. At all.
That's not
Like that, when you start talking bond, operating, or that's not simple. Earned income tax. It certainly helps in some regards because of the operating levy, but I just don't know when you're talking about paying property tax and income tax simultaneously. I don't know. I don't have a good feel for that.
But that's a
I'll share.
year.
Right.
I'll share my perspective. It's a sunk cost, which is why it's an easy lift to go back and say, keep supporting the schools, there's no new net taxes. I'm already paying those property
Right,
taxes.
that's fair.
So when I was at P&G and I moved from the Mason Business Center down to downtown, I started paying 2% city tax on that income. And I saw that, I was like, well, I just got a 2% pay cut, and I was really upset. It didn't tangibly affect anything.
Right.
And so we're talking about 0.75 for people who are choosing to be in this district and wanting good schools because they're coming here with families. I think what it opens up is if I was a retiree or somebody who didn't have income coming in, I would vote for this in a heartbeat and I'd come out to vote. And this allows us to have a stronger community without me paying anything more.
It should keep you from coming back to asking everybody to pay for it. On the per pay, assuming it was a 24 pay year, somebody with 147,000, which was the high end of that median, based on what I can find, $46 per pay. And then that comes out before tax.
$46 per pay if you
Oh,
get paid
24 pays.
if you
147, if you remember 47,000.
get paid like every other week or something. 44 pays, is that what you said?
If it was I didn't do 26 just to be safer.
But you did like 40, like twice.
I did it.
Yeah, like
twice
every
a
month.
Yeah, 24 pays.
So a little under $100 a month.
Or
Yeah, 144
pre-tax.
before tax.
Comes up free.
So it's actually about $60 net to your income. Making $140.
So
Because one of the things we did run into in the fall was, which caught me very off guard. I wouldn't have expected this, was it's an awful bold assumption to just think that we would automatically let you keep what was rolling off. That was how it was working.
Yeah.
So and even for me, I was going, well, I guess I never really thought about it that way because, and usually I think of things like that, but I guess I didn't even get that one. But if that would be the point, then this would be able to keep you. That's not assuming anything on that because that's automatically falling off in the 2-year mark.
And again, as I've said before, if you look at overall how we have been taxed in the state of Ohio, we have been seeing a shift away from income tax and overburdening the property tax, which again was found to be unconstitutional, but it's continued. So this is doing a slight reshift because it's actually lowering people's property taxes, which is what we've been hearing significantly across the state, is people don't want to feel like I've paid for my home, but I'm now going to lose it because I'm getting taxed on a bond issue or a property tax versus income is actually taxing people who are earning the income and at least have an opportunity to pay it versus somebody else who is not doesn't have income and is having a harder time meeting that tax bill. Again, do we wish we didn't have to charge anything? Absolutely. But I also think people recognize that there are values continuing to be a destination district from when you do go to sell your home, everything else that we know is tangible about having strong public schools. So to me, it's the income tax as a way to do a little bit of rebalancing, solve all the problems, not all the problems, solve many problems at once and keep it simple without having to do multiple moving parts and still meet most of our objectives. And I just, to think that we would go now and then to think that we're gonna have any success in 2 years in an operating, I can't even imagine. And then it's just becomes, you've got a building and nobody to staff it, which is to me worse than not passing anything.
And
Quite
these numbers are based around a school district income tax, whether it be traditional or earned, is based on where you live. It's not municipal. Municipal tax is based on first where you work. Then if you work somewhere else but you live there, then it gets you if you live or work. Okay, that's where, but on any type of a school income tax, it is 100% based on where you live. So if somebody drove into this Lakota community and was working, unless they lived here, that wouldn't impact their check at all. It's just for the residents.
What was the King's income tax?
Kings in fall.
One and 1.2, I'd say.
It was like 1.25.
1.25.
1.25, there is,
They had some millage rolling off too.
I got you.
yeah, there is some data looking at the results of the income taxes for schools, and you can't really, the way that the Secretary of State publishes the data, you can't tell the difference between a earned versus traditional, but that there is a greater success for those districts that are 0.75 than 1 or above.
It's like 9.99
It
versus 10.
starts to get like, starts to get really, the odds of being successful with 1 or 1.25 are start to get pretty slim.
Can you share some more thoughts on the thought that it would be worse to have nothing, or to have nothing passed versus to
be able to have facilities and not have
Yeah.
staff? Because then you have people who have spent money to invest in staff and invest in classrooms and invest in capacity and invest in wanting to have smaller class sizes. So they're spending this money with that objective. But because we can't staff it, we've now invested this money, but we can't deliver on the promise of what the facilities can allow us to do.
Because we
Like
can't
we
pass
have,
an operating.
we have said before that a facility in and of itself does not improve education, but what it does is it gives you a vehicle in which to provide more innovative programming, to provide classrooms to allow us to add a teacher. It provides all those educational opportunities because you have the space to do that. And that's what we run into now. Regardless, if we want to address class size, if we had the money to invest in a teacher, we simply can't. So the facilities is buying us the ability to do all the programmatic things that we want to do in order to enhance student learning, to improve our report card, in order to have students be future ready. Right now, we don't have the capacity to do that based on space. But if we go ahead and get the space, but then don't have the money to do anything with it, to me, I, as a taxpayer, am wasting my money to have a building that is now underutilized. And I would rather wait and invest it all at once than to think that I'm gonna be able to do it in 2 steps. I mean, right now we hear you just did a levy and it's been, 13 years ago. If we tried to do one in 2 years, I believe, I will still not be on the board, but I believe that board would get eaten alive. And yes, is it easier to just do the roll off? 100%, but I don't want to have people's money be sitting here underutilized when we can't deliver on the programming, which is truly what's impacting students and what's going to make a difference going forward.
Because she's assuming that we wouldn't be able, I would also agree with this, we would not be able to pass an operating in 2 years. If we pass this bond now.
We don't have
Wait,
a
on-
complicating factor in November was we were talking about buildings, and it was still kind of a Texas two-step a little bit of like, well, you're just building these buildings, it's not gonna solve all the other stuff, but bringing it together in one proposition does keep it simple to say we're addressing space and our operating to make sure that we're solvent through 2032, which when we'll be getting our TIF dollars back, and we should be financially solvent after that. So this is a way to keep us on that 15-year levy cycle, actually,
Right.
versus 2.
And the state changed the rules as well. Like we were trying to land a helicopter and then when the rules were changed, it made it so it doesn't matter what we tried to do. we couldn't
2020
have done
hindsight. Today, the only way it probably would have been worse is if it would have passed in November. And then they would have said, "Look, you guys promised you could have made this work," and we would have went,
The state changed all the rules.
now that just hit the fan. With this, now. All property tax goes away. This is going to be the least of the problems. That's just not, this is just one piece of that pie.
Right.
And that's not going to get us anywhere. I mean, that's going to be a whole different issue. But to what you're saying, you don't want to be house poor. You don't want to have a nice house and then you can't afford to heat it. You can't afford to. You don't want to be, you always want to try to find that really good sweet spot on what delivering what the community expects, whatever that means. And every community's definition is going to be different.
The only consideration though is the data. Not figuring out that income tax with the voters of Lakota will be responsive to the set of messages around an income tax. The data shows 33% success out of the gate. Even among voters that are 65 and older, who would be affected positively by an income tax, they projected 74%. That's what the data shows.
74% for senior citizens.
74% of senior citizens know the income tax.
That's it.
The message
That's
of
gotta be an education.
the message of no new taxes. See, this is the counterintuitive of this, right? It may not have all of the package that allows for what we're trying to achieve here, but the no new taxes is the path to victory.
Well, I would frame it differently and say this is a way to make sure that the teacher that you love in kindergarten is going to be here for your 2-year-old. Because that's realistically the situation we're in. So I understand it is an easy lift to say no new taxes, support our schools. That isn't easy. That is a gimme. That still doesn't solve our problems, whether we're doing buildings or not.
With no new taxes has to come with material programming change. In order to accomplish that, you are going to have that because
Major cut.
When you say.
the increases that we've seen historically with reappraisals and update, not even being overly aggressive, but those are now going to be restricted by half, if not more.
But the other category here is when we look at income taxes, success rate for them across the state. We have to really look hard at those districts that are passing income taxes traditional for buildings. Because most of the time, and I've run these campaigns, right? They're about an earned income tax or a traditional income tax for the operational purposes. So it answers the question that you're bringing up, Doug. It doesn't. I've not seen where the brothers are saying, "I'll pass an income tax to build a building." So it's a different set of.
Well, we're doing both though, because of the challenge that we're in. We're out of space
So we
and we
have
need
to-
to keep our teachers.
I think we'd have to dig deep, find
A comparative.
a comparative situation to what we have.
I mean,
I think we've all seen by now that we have a hard time finding insight like us.
I haven't
That's the problem.
That would be valid anyway.
We could have found that. We'd all have answers to the
yeah.
problems.
And if we do have a issue that's repealed property tax completely on the ballot, whether or not it passes or not, there's probably not a lot of data out there of what issues that increase property tax or do anything with property tax do in that environment. So, yeah, we're gonna.
In a sticky situation because I feel like we're gonna take care of the seniors who don't lose their house, to Julie's point, to keep it as a destination district and people to come. But what if the families that are here can't afford it because it's now double the amount of money they would have to pay in essence, and they don't stay. So we aren't a destination district. We still have all of the seniors, but we don't have. I don't know. I don't have the answer except the money tree, which no one's planted.
I know we like to talk about having a crystal ball, but what we do know is that in 2 years, we run out of money. And that is a hard conversation that this community needs to understand. And so we need more revenue, or we're gonna see the kind of cuts that we saw back in 2010 or 8 or
11 when I joined the board,
11.
first time on the
11.
board.
That's the reality that we're in. Now, we can build new buildings and we can do bonds very simply and pretend and kick it down the road for 2 years. Or we can have an honest conversation with our community today to say, this is what we're looking at. And we can do a little bit here, a little bit there, but we're still going to be looking at this future. Or we can have an honest conversation with them about, let's stop trying to just keep on going like we've been going for the past 10 years. And instead, let's actually build the destination district that you want to have. We've had these conversations with the stakeholders. The problem is we haven't presented a plan that does both at the same time. And I would rather take on that challenge and even potentially hear no in November. So then we have the ability to have some sort of plan on how we're going to manage the cuts that we're going to see in 2028. Because if we don't get a solution in November of this year that gets us solvent through 2032, my preference is, okay, let's start planning the cuts because nobody likes those cuts, but they're coming because we don't have the money. So that's the reality that we're doing. So it sounds a little bit more of a threat than a proposition, but it's not. Here is a chance to get what we want as a community, or the reality is we're going to be facing cuts. And that is a complicated, but it's not. It is, we can keep kicking the can down that we've been doing for the past since 2013, or we can actually take control of what we want to build and do it the right way, or we're going to see the cuts in 2 years.
I would say that that's the right set of arguments and conversation to be having if it was an operational.
It's both. It's going into operational funds,
Yeah.
and we're going to use some of that to build some buildings. And I think that's why this is the problem that we had in November. We talked about buildings. We didn't talk about class size. We didn't talk about programming. We didn't talk about that. We need to be talking both at the same time, and then people will understand that they're voting for both at the same time. The no people who are anti-tax completely and anti-public education, they're going to come after us with all those little naysayers. That's not who we need to talk to. We need to talk to the families. We need to talk to our teachers and staff that are dependent on us figuring out this solution. And we need to rally the people who come out for public education to say, no, this is a solid plan. This is going to keep us solvent through 2032, where they're not going to come back tin cupping us every year. And we're going to have schools that we can be proud of. And my kid's going to actually have specials. They're going to have PE for the first time year round since 2010. I mean, these are the basics that when I came into the district, I couldn't believe didn't exist. And now my daughter's graduated and she still never saw any of that. My son's in 9th grade. He's still not going to see any of this at this rate. This is what we need to start addressing. And I'm getting a little passionate because this is the reason why we're in this situation. We never were willing to step up and have an honest discussion about what the finances of this district look like and what kind of revenue we need. Even with this tax cutting, we're still going to have one of the most lowest effective tax rates of any other community, much less communities that deliver the high education that we do today. And so again, if people can't pay 0.75 income tax or bond or whatever this is, then they can find another community with as good as schools with a lower effective tax rate. It's not going to be in the state. So I think that's also part of this that we need to take into account. Yeah, I don't want to pay more new taxes, but I also don't want my school district to go to rot. So it's going to be a hard conversation, but we've got to have the conversation with them now, or else we've got to start preparing for 2020.
Fortunate.
There's a difference though between, like you said, if they don't want to pay it, they can go someplace else. There's a difference between wanting to pay it and not being able.
I think he's saying
So
there's not another place to go.
point being is there's not another place that delivers this quality of education with this low effective tax rate.
I understand that.
And so I understand that asking for more money, but the choice is we don't ask for more money and then you don't get this quality education. And it's going to be drastically curtailed in 2 years. I didn't make the rules of the state of how public schools are funded. In fact, it's been called unconstitutional, as you pointed out. But we live in the reality of the laws that we have. And so we have not asked for more money since 2013.
That was our first mistake.
Well, it's not a mistake. I'm actually really happy as a primary rights. I haven't had to pay more since 2013. That's not a bad thing. But at the end of the day, we're still paying for our high quality education with $2013. And I am not getting that on my gas. I'm not getting that on my eggs or my milk or anything else out there. So we need to have that honest conversation with. And I think if you stop asking questions about building configurations and funding mechanisms and ask questions of the voters of, do you want a district of this caliber that could get even better? Or do you want a district that's going to be running out of money and have to do cuts? I think that changes the paradigm of how I answer that question of, well, maybe I like a little bit more tax, just a smidge.
So can I, just some words reflecting on what's been said, and I fully understand that you're trying to solve that. I agree. You know, and I compliment you for trying to look at, hey, this is the big picture. But how do you know, it's hard when you're about ready to putt to say, hey, you gotta go tee off again. Because it's gonna be a difficult, the tax increase at this, gonna be difficult. So don't lose the opportunity in front of you. But what is the solution that could work for everybody? And it's simply, if you're gonna shoot me, run two different items. Run a bond issue, run a separate either PF or PAC, run them together at the same time, but let the voters decide what they want.
I don't. You'll have two things on the ballot?
So you're saying instead of a 0.75 earned income, it's
We'll have two
different issues.
two items that we're gonna go in and see, and you're gonna campaign on both, and you're gonna be able to explain them. Separate them, I think the bond issue could be explained. But, gives you an opportunity to focus in, you're gonna have to have that hard conversation. And that's the problem, is a lot of districts don't wanna talk about, hey, they don't wanna talk about, hey, if it doesn't pass, we're gonna have to make some cuts.
Are you talking about combining them into one issue, or you actually have two opportunities to vote?
Two opportunities to vote.
Oh, God.
You're saying that buildings with a bond and operational with an earned income tax.
I would rather do it one
both,
first and then the other one.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
You're being authentic because you're letting folks know, hey, this is the situation we have. And you're being very clear. And you're also defining to them, if we can't get the operational dollars, we're not gonna be able to afford the number of teachers that we need in order to deliver the kind of educational program. But the board has to be very clear with that message. That we're doing this because of a necessity, not because of wants.
If we get operating but not buildings, then we need more operating. That's part of the issue.
Building and not operating, then we just have.
Then we're in that,
Well,
Yeah.
you're going back to, right now, you're trying to solve, the issue is you're trying to solve a problem that's gonna occur in 2 or 3 years. And I get it. The reality is, the state is changing, there's so much out there, it's hard to make a projection with all the changes that are coming to you. I get that, and I feel for you. All I'm saying is let's separate the two, because I think that there are two clearly distinct, two different conversations that we have.
Potentially, but I also think, as we talked, they're inherently linked, because it's not, if we had the space to be able to offer the programming that we wanted and have the increases from an operational, that would be different. They're intrinsically linked. And so I think if you get one horse in front of the other, you're not pulling with the right to deliver what we're trying to do. And I think the default then would be, well, okay, I care more about keeping it solvent than the buildings, and then we're still in the same spot that we're in. I hear it's worth exploring. I think it's worth seeing if there's a dual path where that would make sense, but I also worry about people being able to keep track of 2 ballot measures and just disengaging completely.
I mean, if you look at statewide, there's about 90% of school districts who, if you project out 4 years, they're gonna be running a deficit. So
Right.
we're not unique in this scenario, so to me, that makes it seem like hopefully the state will come up with a solution, but we've had that hope before and it has not happened. So,
More power to you.
Delhi's new.
Yeah. But I mean, if we're going to explore different alternatives, I guess what are the alternatives that we would explore at this point? There's let's fix our problems, and I think it seems like all of our problems, let's fix that. It seems like an earned income tax is the most straightforward and simplest way to do that. The other option is let's bite off part of the problems that we have and solve that and solve the other problem a separate way. And there's different, we've talked about a bunch of different ways that we can do that. So I don't know if there's appetite to continue exploring what's the best way to split it into two problems. And I think we kind of have a consensus for what's the best way to solve it at once. Is there, I'm not sure if there's an appetite to.
But the problem is timing. We're under the gun.
Right.
If we need something in November. And if we want the first resolution of necessity to be a week from Monday, 2 weeks from today, we've got to make some kind of something.
So I will say that timeline is self-imposed. Now, I don't want it to get too far, because we got some transitions happening. Right, I don't want it to get too far, so, I mean, you could go May, June, go April, June, you could go, but I would not recommend we go past June.
Well, now we have talked to both last week, both DPC and President's Council, telling our families that there would be a decision before school was out.
Yeah, I don't think the time is gonna help us.
I'm not sure it will, I'm just saying, yeah.
That was a lesson from last year, was not having an answer before school was out.
I don't know how much time that we have to continue to explore, but I mean, they're on another meeting.
Well, I mean, I don't know if we need another meeting. Do we have consensus on what we want to do? Do we want to solve it at once? Do we think we have consensus on that?
If we need to solve it, I will say, I as one believe we need to solve it at once. Again, clearly, it may not be everyone's, that's where I am. I understand that in politics, the way of the world and today is to leave it for the next guy to fix. And there's a reason for that, because it's more politically popular in the moment, but it's, in my opinion, not the right thing to do. And I feel strongly I'm not taking the easy road, but taking the right road. It's in my opinion, and again, others can think I'm completely wrong and it's the wrong road, and that's fine. But where I am in my head is, I think the earned income has a great opportunity for us to rebalance and solve our problems without being disingenuous to our community of what's coming and what we can accomplish at once. I think about another levy, I forget it was one that failed, and it was like part of it was gonna hit at one point, and then part of it was gonna hit 2 years later. It was like a 2-phase approach when it was gonna collect. And all everybody did was add it up anyway. So it's like, all the material that was out against the issue acted as if it was one valid issue. So again, that's me as one point when you're asking where we have consensus or where people are. I struggle to support just doing, like I said, for all the reasons I said.
If we want to help all at once, is there anyone else who thinks that there's a better way than earned income tax to do it?
Not that would be simple.
What? Yeah, I mean,
simple, I think simple is one of the big keys here. That step 3 where Adam let's just pretend you did all of that on one, we would be laughed out of town. I think that there's not another.
And it's still not great.
And it's still.
And I want you all to hear me say that. And that third option that has all the different ways of using all the different tools besides the income tax to get us there, it's still not a great path. I'm just going to tell you, it's still about $1 million more in 5th year at the very bottom line. It has some planning going on within that. It's as lean as I could make it. Let's go that route.
So do we have any desire, I guess, because you have to come to us with resolutions for the 27th, correct? If
resolutions of necessity.
Yeah, the necessity thing. I mean, do we want to try doing both of them again? If nobody believes, I don't know.
I think we can all say that this is not an option. This
Yeah,
one
that
with
one, all the red.
This is a lot.
That's too
Like,
much.
nobody's understanding this, right? I mean, I think you could come with
the option we have in front of us. We could maybe look at Tom's option of splitting it like a two situation. I mean,
It's getting twitchy.
Had a cold, snap.
this community's tolerance for operating levies is not good. It's just not,
It's
it's
not.
not good. And I'm cognizant of some timing of some things that when you look at 28 and even now, there's some things. There's gonna be hard to separate of timings. Do you know what I mean? You go, okay, well, this happened and now you're going to ballot and this happened. And now you're going to ballot, like, there's some rough timing in that, not insurmountable, but.
When I think back to the plan on, and that we put on the ballot in November, there were the parts about it I liked, there's parts I didn't like about it, but I liked putting it on the ballot because the idea was that it would solve us through 2032. Granted, the legislature wanted to had us some nice surprises there, but I think that's still kind of my guiding principle on this is what's going to make sure that we're whole, because I don't want to leave the district in a bind. And I don't want to have that hard conversation when we already haven't got the level of services that our community wants from us, to then be talking about, hey, yeah, not only are we not bringing those back, but we're also going to be looking at cutting more services.
And just to clarify, when you say 2032, you mean 2032 and beyond?
Yes, I mean, yes, I'm sorry.
So I
I'm
just
sorry.
wanted to clarify
inherent
so
there is-
people don't
is
think that it's.
Because of the
true.
TIF situation that we're in, that money that has been delayed because of the townships and the county and how they've taken our money and held it for a while. That will be coming back to us, which is a better gift than the 32-year bond issue, which is, okay, then we'll be in a good shape.
The 30 years will have expired.
Yes.
The 30 years that we had to forego collections on those properties will then start benefiting Lakota.
I have a question. That I don't mean it to sound at all pessimistic, but I think it's a question that has to be asked. If this goes, like, let's just say we're 0.75 earn income, because we think it's gonna skin a couple cats. I like the cats, always, right? What happens if it fails?
That's.
My question is, that's my question. I'm just, and I'm not trying to be
Well,
pessimistic, because,
I think that was the problem last time. We didn't tell anybody what would happen.
well,
We did, but.
I mean, the easy answer, and I don't say it's easy, the easy answer is, well, if you're going for an operating levy then in 2028. I mean, that's the easy answer. Not easy, right? But I mean, that's the next logical choice. My question would be, what would happen to the master facilities plan discussion as we know it? When you've gone back to the ballot twice with two different iterations, and a community says, I don't have the stomach for this. What is our next move in that regard?
From my perspective, which is if this is November 9th or whatever the date is that we vote, and you don't have a solution, I'm gonna be very focused in on, okay, how do we stay financially solvent,
Right.
which means RIF. I mean, fundamentally, and I think I don't like being the board that gives people a summer to notice that, oh, by the way, all your teachers are getting fired. So I would want, and I think we've asked for that, what is that plan without the operational levy? This operational levy that's in 29 on the 5-year plan, it's a nice crutch. That is not reality. That is assuming we can do all the heavy lifting we're talking about here in 2 years instead of now. So maybe it's better to actually not assume that and look at what does our staffing plan already look like in 29 without this assumption, and start communicating that out to the public. Because that's November 9th, I think that's the discussion we got to start having right away, is because I want to give people time to understand the impacts of those cuts.
But a no is more than just being solvent. A no is we don't have any space. A no is
Oh,
we
yeah,
have
sorry.
35.
At that point, the master facilities is
Well,
dead in my mind.
But what do you do?
I'm
That's my
I'm
conversation.
prioritizing teachers over buildings.
I understand that, but we still have 35 children in a classroom. We still have no, I mean, if that's what the community wants, I guess that's what the community wants. But I think it's more about being solvent. It's about the actual physical buildings. It's about freshmen, Adina, and the amount of money that we.
That's the reason I asked that question. If a community says no in November, I kind of I kind of am wording this.
Yeah, I
Like the
mean-
master facilities plan, as we know, it would be an end of it would be the end of the discussion.
And then you have to.
Because
figure out-
we're in a because the reason I say that. And again, it depends on what you put on the ballot, but the first one was, it's too much money, right? And it was for our community. The second one, at a very different price point for buildings, I'm just gonna focus on the buildings piece. If they say no to that again.
Right.
It's not just the money. There's just not an appetite in this community for that plan. And I think then it is about. How can we use our existing footprint to make sure that we can keep the staff that we have and the programming in some
Yeah.
way?
Well, and we can't.
But we
won't be
can't.
able to-
No, we would be decreasing. What I'm saying is we
Right.
would be holding on to what we could, but it would absolutely programming would change.
So once you pass November, no option's going to be less than what that is.
Correct.
Well,
Because it would actually get finitely higher than that. Because now your timing is going to come at a cost premium.
yeah.
So it's going to, the price point is going to shift drastically.
And I do think.
And that's why you'd have to look the other
The reason
direction.
the reason I say that. And I'm putting my parent hat on here, okay? And my child will not be in this district to live and see the fruition of this plan, right? But if you tell me, whatever we put on the ballot in November, that if this community says no to master facilities at this point, putting it to bed, that says something to me, like, oh my gosh, like, my current reality is like, not even my current reality, just my current footprint, current buildings, West Freshman, and like, those are my reality for the next whatever. I do think people need to be aware of that. Because I think.
Well,
My-
accidents.
My warning about that is, I think it's easy then to separate them out, which isn't the case. I think. If we're talking about this framing of the one solution, then I think it's imperative that we have that 28, 29, 30 staffing plan. As part of this conversation to show the effects, because I don't know what that percentage is, but if it's a 10% reduction in staffing, or if it's a 30% staffing reduction in staffing. That's going to be the case point for being solved.
I don't know what I would call these. None of these are simple. But if you ask me today, I would say all day kindergarten goes, say all specials go in K-6. I would say central as we know it goes. I would say all teacher leaders go. And that's first blush. I mean, that's.
Yeah, but for the community, we need a better answer than that, because a lot of that, I mean, some of that they understand, they don't necessarily understand all of
Correct.
that.
But when you take when you take away K through 5 special,
Yeah, they're gonna.
you have
understand that.
impacted a 7 through 12 music program, art program, like band as we know it looks different. Art as we know it looks like some backbones of this community will look very different because you do not have an elementary program to support that.
Yeah.
And kindergarten,
Well, and it will take us to
Doesn't
where we were in 2011, which is we will be off of all of the realtor lists, we'll be off the P&G list. People will move, people will leave because they will not get the robust education that we're known for.
Are we back on those now?
We are,
we're on.
We are,
we're
okay.
on P&G, but
Okay.
yeah.
I mean, those are still a thing.
yes, they
Okay.
just say.
And then the secondary question that, to me, depending on what the answer to the first one is, if we were to pass just the facilities to do the roll off, no taxes, but then failed in 2 years when we did an operating,
You're right back. to
and
where-
it's the same discussion, except you now have invested more money here, so people have less disposable income to even consider anything
You
else.
would then have to have 37 kids in a class with more empty classes. Because we wouldn't be
We
able to
have enough
staff.
teachers.
Right.
There's still gonna be.
There would be room at the end, just
Well,
not enough.
We got there. When I was here as a teacher, we got there. I mean, I was teaching 36 children in honors English.
I had 42 kids
We
in my
got there.
son's third grade math.
I mean, it wasn't like universal, but we certainly got there because we were trying to keep like certain levels more manageable and the higher levels took some hits because we were just trying to triage.
So for the 27th, what do we want?
I'll share my perspective like Julie did, which is I'm of the one solution, and I think the 0.75 income tax is the simplest. It gives us the ability to kind of do both of those things.
Alex, Ben? And do we want him to model resolution, the bond issue and 75.75%? 75%.
You mean like a bond issue and an operating levy that would be an operating that would be earned through the earned income, basically, is that what you're saying?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that whatever,
I just
that-
want- yeah.
and do we want to just, we want to have some offline meetings with Tom on his. Two things on the ballots is based on. And I please respect your talents and what you do, but this community is just not like any other. One of these things is not like the other. Just based on the many years. I don't know.
Ben, what are your thoughts about the operating levy? I mean, not operating, but the earned income, because I know originally when we had that conversation. I feel like that wasn't the way you're leaning, maybe I read that wrong, but what are your thoughts on the earned income piece?
I respect what Tom was saying. I sympathize with it because, again, it is, I believe, a lot more genuine than just the bond issue and focus on that one. I would be more like what Ms. Schaefer was saying, Mr. Horton was saying. Not an endorsement, per se, of the levy one way or another, but I think that you need to put it on one ballot. You need to have both questions, right? Staff, operating, and facilities. I think it's safer that way. I think it's more upfront, honest, and that would be what I would be leaning towards.
Would you be leaning towards that as a?
Are you talking about two different things on one ballot? Or
Different things on the ballot.
Oh, with regards to,
you said you want to put it all on one ballot.
yeah, I
What would that look
would,
like?
one ballot, one issue, so you don't get like, yes on the bond, no
No,
on operating.
Okay.
In terms of earned income versus property. I would probably be more in favor of. I would be okay with seeing both resolutions brought to us like back in, I believe, February.
So that would be
You're saying do it all at once with property?
No, I'm saying just.
Is
give
the
us option.
property option?
Give us, I would just say,
We got the earned income up right here.
Right, but remember when in February we had a resolution for a 35 and a 37, and 35, 37 income version and the property version. I think doing something like that similar of this next meeting, pretty good. Continue the discussion, give us more time.
So what does that other option look like, I guess is the question.
that's what I was gonna ask, debt only. Debt only would be bond issue only. The last time we had a bond and a permanent improvement, that was a two-parter. When I hear, and I've kind of heard a consensus of simple being one issue on an issue would mean bond only. It would be my take.
I think the bond plus the was PI.
Okay.
I think seeing that option would.
So still not the operating piece, we would still need to potentially do the 1.5 mils operating down the road.
I'm truthfully not even necessarily opposed towards seeing, I mean, you could call it chaotic ballot issue, but I'm not opposed towards seeing that as an option.
The third one.
Yeah, the third one when we put on resolutions of it. That's the.
Just to pick up on that point, Tom, we're required to have at least a 0.5 PI, right, as part of this because of the funds in the state?
District already meets that requirement.
Oh, we've already got that side, okay. So we could just do a bond.
And Adam, in this modeling that you did of the earned income, it would be a year cop still.
That's correct.
Okay, just want to make sure I wrote that down.
Yeah, when the going about it in different funding mechanisms, you are bound to term. So when you do a COPS, 27 is the max.
Sure, I had that right there.
So what are we doing for next time?
Yeah, can somebody tell me what I'm going to tell someone else and then I'll repeat it back? So that I make sure that I'm hearing it the right way.
I told you, ladies, on what you want to see.
I mean, I definitely want us to continue the discussion on the 0.75% earned income tax. Yeah, I mean. think if I had to pick today, and that's probably the road that I would go down, but if that's not where everybody else is, then I guess the question to me is what do they want to see that would be the other potential? So
I don't think, does anybody want the chaotic option? Is that what Ben just said? He wants the chaotic
I
option?
said maybe.
Well, I think so.
No, I mean, does anybody else want to look at it? Yeah.
I heard
That's what I'm
it.
trying to decide. We're gonna come with 14 resolutions on the 27th.
I think I heard Ben say he at least wants to see the bond and the PI,
Bond and PI, okay.
right?
Well, but
Which,
then he wouldn't.
but then you also said you might want to see the bond operating and PI. Do you want to see that one too?
I'd be okay.
Okay,
So bond PI and then bond operating PI.
so I think you got three. If I'm hearing correctly, we've got, I labeled your little papers, 1, 2, and 3 in the order you gave us. The earned income. I think that would be one. The bond operating PI, that would be one. And then just the bond and the PI without the operating.
In essence, I want, again, if we're at this meeting, say, well, I only want to see this one, that's the only resolution that's brought up on April 27th. I feel like that's pigeonholing. I want to be able to go from this meeting to various stakeholders and say, hey, here are different options.
I'm
that
just
we're
thinking,
discussing.
and I'm just thinking through kind of that, what Ben just said in that lens. Do we want to see
The no new taxes
no
option.
new taxes option? Because if you don't, I'm not saying it's right, wrong, good or bad, I'm just saying if you don't, you're a month, you know what I mean? You come back to it, you're a month out. You get what I'm saying? You've lost that traction.
That would be the bond only option.
Yes.
And let me, before we come back to that, let me do one clarifying question. I'm going to have some staffing assumptions coming up, I believe. We talked about that. We're going to have some of that. Would it be safe to assume that we need to figure out within every one of these options, they're formed in a way that gets us to 32 and then sustainable forward? Is that a fair assessment? Because I can say bond PI do. Maybe that's $500,000 because that's what it takes to do a project. Yeah, you can say these things. But if that's not going to, based on the information that I have at this time, make me feel like we're going to get to 32, should we structure it that way? Because if not, then it is going to result in something else having to come. That's why I'm saying it like this.
I'll share my collection. That's the consensus I kind of felt like from the board, but I will call out like the no new millage would not do that.
That won't at all. Right. We know that, but like for the bond/PI, I can juggle that differently than the bond operating and PI. You see what I'm saying? That's why I'm going to juggle this into an assumption. If Columbus doesn't change everything else, or property doesn't go away, to be fair, that should reasonably assume to get us there.
I think that's what I heard.
I've connected my dots, I feel like pretty close to say that I want the long-term solution. I don't think I've left a lot of space between my viewpoint on those.
Okay.
So where did that last one land? Of the, like, no new,
Are we gonna even look at that option?
I just asked that
Yeah.
because, again, if the window passed, I just want to put it out there.
Yeah, and
I don't want to look at it. That's just me as an individual. I don't want to.
we can have them drawn up. I mean, I'm getting ready to go to this conference. Once we get beyond one, these people are going to probably belittle me in front of everyone anyhow, so it'll be okay. I mean, they might have laughs at me, because of that, but that's okay.
It's your daily normal.
Yeah, right. I mean, I'll just put my LASIK plus glasses on and I'll pretend I can't see anyhow and it'll be fine.
So I'm just making sure. 1, 2. Kelly, did I hear?
Sure.
So I'm thinking 4. I'm just checking. So bond only, no new millage. Earned, bond and PI, bond, PI, and operating. So 4 different ones.
Yeah, we already have a similar to the way that layout will look on the bond operating and PI. We already have similar to what the earned would look like. The bond MPI would look a little bit different and the bond's gonna look like 2.23.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Be that much.
yeah, the only one that's gonna look a little bit skewed out from that's going to be the bond PI one. That's fine.
There was a slide that said, but our computer has died. It did for a while. No, it's okay. I do think there, and we can have this conversation today, we can have this conversation later, but I do think there's some opportunities and Tom can chime in here too on this. You know, when you ask the OFCC about tying buildings together, and if there's a safety concern, and they go, no, you're like, really? Like, shouldn't we have children outside? Like, how is that not? But I do think there might be a chance for us to maybe try to do some legislative things around that. And like I said, we can look at that a little bit further, but I think there's some and I really do think there's some opportunity there and it's a pretty small change. It's not anything sweeping language wise. It's changing a couple sentences here and there. That we might be able to get some traction on to get that changed, so we can look at that. Like I said, once we get past this discussion, we can look at that. But I do think there might be some opportunities there to benefit, not just us, but I mean, as a parent, as an school administrator, whatever, when you talk about children going outside, again, having lived a California school model in the middle of Ohio, it's rough, right? And so I do think it would make sense to look at that, how that could behoove us all. So that might be an opportunity that we can explore going forward as well.
Okay, appreciate the way everyone's trying to connect the building to the boxes. It's outside of the box.
Anybody have anything else? Okay, then we will call for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
In a second.
Yeah.
Mr. Quinn,
Yes.
Ms. Schaefer,
Yes.
Mr. Argo,
Yes.
Mr. Hortons.
Oh.
Yeah.
Mr. Hortons.
Yes.
Ms. Casper.
Yeah, very.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah.